So while Lutz is setting up his presentation, let me introduce him. He is coming also from ECM for you. Is that correct? Yes.
Yes, right.
So probably if you saw the presentation of Heiko earlier this day, he's a colleague of Heiko. So they are doing great stuff in Germany. Also, something important from his profile in general is that he also is a Python lover, as I am. So it's one of the good things to have people doing things with Alfresco, which are also doing some other stuff in other languages, which brings up all the ideas together and not just concentrating one niche stuff. So I'm really looking forward to hear what Lutz is going to say, and I hope you are going to enjoy his presentation. So please give an applause for his motivation.
Thank you, Boris. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You can hear me? Heiko can't hear me. Okay, I will speak up a little bit. This microphone is only for the recording. So, the topic of my talk is gotchas encountered while implementing an asynchronous transformation service for Alfresco. It's quite long. The important part is gotchas. We try to implement a specific feature using Alfresco, using, as we thought, public APIs. And we had some problems, which some of them I want to show you and share with you. Maybe I was only too dumb to know better before, but maybe it's a problem generally. My name, Boris said, is Lutz Horn, ECM for you. If you're old-fashioned as I am, you can find me on IRC in the channel Alfresco and the Order of the Bee and Theodroma there. So what I want to talk about, first the scenario, what was the situation we wanted to implement this feature in, our motivation, why we wanted to implement this feature, then what we have tried. This is a really rough outline of what we've tried to implement actually, the so-called asynchronous transformation service, and then 3 gotchas which we encountered. The first one I call transforming what exactly. What exactly is the document we are transforming in the moment? The second gotcha I called we want to control if we transform, not what and how, but if we are the party in this moment that is responsible for transformation, or maybe somebody else. And the third gotcha, which is, I think it goes without saying, important, content must not be lost. No customer, no user of the customer can and will accept that content he is working on is gone. And actually we were able to produce this situation. So the scenario, first about size, we are working on Community Edition, and the installation of this customer is quite big, I think, for community standards, which it has 200 plus concurrent users, not registered users or generated users in the system, but concurrent users, and there are about 10 million plus documents, and they are of course growing on a daily basis. The users in this scenario are, in one word, Windows users. They are not using Alfresco over some API or over Share or some other client. They are Windows users working on Windows desktops using Microsoft Office. That's the tool. They have mounted Alfresco using the standard features, WebDAV or SIFs, second possible option, SharePoint also, but these are the standard existing connection tools that they use. And as I said, they use Microsoft Office, and they use Microsoft Office only. They don't use LibreOffice or Open Document Format or anything else. They use Microsoft Office in the current version. And they, of course, want to have these kinds of documents stored reliably inside Alfresco and especially rendered for the previews in a nice way. So our motivation in this scenario is hinted as in what I just said. The first motivation is for the previews, the PDF generated from these documents for share, for the preview, shall be rendered in an appealing way. They shall look nice, and of course they shall look exactly as they are displayed in Microsoft Office. I'm not sure if you work with current versions of Microsoft Office and if you compare what a rather complex PowerPoint or Excel document of the current Microsoft Office format looks in LibreOffice. If you don't know, I can tell you it doesn't look exactly the same. It looks rather odd. Their alignment, the layout is a little bit odd. Fonts are not exactly the size as you expect. I don't want to argue whose fault this is, if Microsoft is the bad part or if the LibreOffice guys are not able enough. This is a situation we have to deal with, and the customers don't accept this. They want, if they use Share, to see a PDF rendition, a preview, which exactly looks as they would see the document if they open it in Microsoft Office. And they are, on a regular basis, irritated if they see it's not the same as I thought I built my document. So this is one motivation. The second motivation is, in this setup, we, on a regular basis, had the situation that Alfresco became unresponsive when many documents were transformed at the same time. This happened, as I said, on a regular basis. People have Alfresco mounted using WebDAV or sifs, and they open a document in Excel. They work on it, it makes autosaves, they save it by hand, they close the document. And maybe you know this, every time this happens, on the back end, the rendition engine starts. A rendition is generated from this change content property. And in Community Edition, this rendition is done by LibreOffice. In the back end, there's one LibreOffice process running as Office. You can see it in the process list. And this process is hanging. Not immediately, but it hangs if many requests for transformation from document to PDF are triggered not on the same time, but closely together. This is caused maybe because the document is too complex, or LibreOffice is a bad implementation, I don't know, but it happens. And the result is that Alfresco becomes unresponsive because Alfresco, the repository, which and also Share, is triggering requests to this backend process, and it's triggering more requests, and none of them returns, and the threads pile up. The threads in Alfresco, the backend, pile up, and the systems are waiting for each other to continue. And we have a deadlock, also not exactly a deadlock, but a situation where the system does not respond anymore. The solution, if you notice this fast enough, is to kill the as-office process. It works if you notice it fast enough. If you wait too long, maybe 10 minutes, then it's slow enough so you have to restart the whole Alfresco process, which of course is not acceptable. Third situation, or motivation, is we want to control the load, the order, and the results of concurrent transformation. Right now, the transformations say, I take the document, I create the PDF rendition from this, and from this I extract text. For example, it's one of these complex transformers. This is not the thing we want. We want to control if, for example, the PNG for the preview in the document library is generated from the PDF, maybe from a cached PDF. So, but this is not as important as the first thing. So what we've tried, just a short outline, we built an asynchronous system where we implemented a job queue, which is done by a policy. On content update, we create a job in a special table, which we implemented, which we called a job table, which just said, for this node, please generate renditions. For the user to see something, we immediately save dummy renditions in the proper nodes, in the content node or in the child nodes. Some dummies, some pre-canned PDF or PNG dummy, also done by this policy. And then in the backend, we have some asynchronous worker, a different process, which actually is implemented in Python, as Boris just so told, which polls this queue. We can do it differently, but it's polling right now. It's using the content, it's passing it to a different rendition server, doesn't matter right here, and it's returning the result back to Alfresco using a push, using a web script. And as an addition, we cache the extracted text for Solr, because later on Solr will come and say, give me the text for this document. I want to make a full text index from this. So now we have 3 gotchas, which we encountered while doing this. The first was, what are we transforming exactly? Transformation is done by implementations of content transformers. That's an interface, and it has one method. I hope you can see it. It's the code from 50D, Community Edition. And in this interface, there's one method which is called transform. And it has 2 arguments, the content reader and the content writer. The problem is the content reader and the content writer basically are input and output streams on the Java level, and they have no information about the node which we're actually transforming. There's no information about the node ref, which we could use to get other stuff, maybe about, I don't know, anything. Node ref would be fine. interesting thing we see up here in the Java doc, there is a transformation option which is not here in this signature of this method, but there's a second method on this interface content transformer, which is also called transform. I'm sorry, it's at the bottom. It's also called transform. It has also the two parameters, content reader and content writer, and as a third parameter, it has transformation options. This is what we need because in the transformation options, which is a class, there are 4 members plus more, and one is the source node ref for the source node. This is what we want. If we have this, we know everything about the node we are transforming, and we can decide how to deal it. If we want to use this special backend or this special backend, if we want to generate this kind of transitions or not. Problem is, right now, the content transformer is called by a web script called node content get. That's a web script which Solar calls to get the content of the node. And in there you see, maybe on the second line, there's transform reader writer. So it's using the short version of this method in the API without the transformation options. The interesting thing is, further up in the code, we have this second snippet of code, and we have the options. They are there, but they are not passed to this call of transform. So what we have to do this sometimes again. We have to patch this class and just add the correct line. It's a patch of one line, transform, reader, writer options. And now in the back end, we can actually know which node we are transforming, and we can base logic on this. So this is one line, a patch of one line, which we had to do to be able to implement this feature, because otherwise Solar wouldn't get the content it expected. So if I were able to build a wish list, I would say, please, developers, pass as much information as possible, even if you don't know it, if the client, the called code will need it, because we are passing to an interface and not to a concrete implementation. And maybe there will be an implementation in the future which actually uses this transformation option. So please pass them. But this is rather wishful thinking, please provide an API for Solar to push text, and don't have us rely on Solar to call us to guess the text of a node. Okay, that was the first one. The second one, we want to control if we transform. The order and the selection of transformers is governed by a class transformer selector. Now that's an interface which has a method at the bottom again, select transformers, and there comes in a source MIME type and some other stuffs. So the default implementation transformer selector impl of this interface does a lot of things, and in the Java doc it says default transformer select implementation, which sorts by priority and then by average transform time. So some kind of code in Alfresco keeps track of how long the transformer is actually taking, and then it calculates which is good, which is bad, which is fast, which is slow, and who will be called transform document in the future. This is not what we want. We want to be in front always. We want to be in control if we transform, and even if we are slow, because we are doing it in an asynchronous way, or if we do a more complex transformation, we want to be in control. We don't want to be graded down only because we are doing this slow. So what did we have to do to change this? There's a Spring Bean, which is called, the ID in Spring is Content Transformer Registry. It's a general Spring Bean. We had to patch this. We had to implement our own transformer selector. This is the interface. And in this implementation of this interface, we had to write code which always sorts our concrete transformers in the backend to the top of this list. So it's very simple code. A list comes in, we say, doesn't matter how this list is sorted at the moment, we are on top, we are the first. Again, it's patching, Spring Bean, implementation of class, and some custom code. But this enabled us to always be in control that we are the transformer that is doing this transformation. So again, a wish list, make it possible to control the selections based on node properties. Right now, this selection is not based on properties of the concrete node, but on rather abstract information about how long took a similar transformation in the past. This is not the thing we want to base our logic on. And maybe this is more my problem. The current configuration for transformers in property files is rather complex. I didn't really understand how this works. Okay, second gotcha. The third gotcha, which is, I think it goes without saying, content must not be lost. Every content the user is working must be there in a reliable way. I said in the beginning what we try to do. We implemented a policy that listens for content update. Content property is changed. It writes dummy renditions for PDF, for doclib, for web preview, for image preview. It creates a job in the SKU database, and there is a web script which accepts renditions later after the transformation is done in our backend, and this web script writes the rendition back to the child node of the node, the affected node. So it replaces the dummy PDF with the real PDF, or the dummy PNG with the real PNG. So in this situation, content must not be lost, but we had several problems in implementing this because we didn't know when is content really written by the application, the client application. Remember Microsoft Office tools, thanks. Then which events do we have to ignore? For example, writing a temporary file or a locked file or things like this. Not every time the node content, the content property is changed, we really want to build this renditions. Sometimes we want to ignore this. Then of course we must know, does this node still exist, and is it still the node we want to write to? And the problem is, why is this question important? Because Microsoft Office uses some kind of shuffle node. It actually opens two files, the real file and the second file, and it writes, I'm not quite sure how the order is, but it's a complicated pattern that Microsoft Office uses to write to two files, and then after the save is done, it swaps contents and later it deletes one. So since Alfresco sees two files, there is quite complicated implementation in Alfresco which tries to recognize this pattern, this shuffle node pattern, and to be intelligent enough to say, this is a temporary file written by Microsoft Word, don't touch it and ignore it, because later on there will be a second file and this is the real file I think it should be. This is complicated. It's not the problem of Alfresco. It's a problem of the application which is writing this. One problem is that there are different applications doing this in different ways, and we really bait the bullet on this. So our problem was we had a policy, but we didn't know there's a different one. There is renditioned aspect. It's called aspect, but it has nothing to do with aspect, because it is, maybe you can see, as an implementation of node service policies on update properties policy and copy service policies on copy node policies. And what it does is, this is implementation, but I can tell you, on every change of properties of the node, an action is created, so a delete rendition action, which deletes every rendition of this node. We didn't know this, but it happens. I don't know where this is written down in documentation. It happens, and we didn't know it. And remember, at the same time, we have a web script which writes to these renditions which we think are there. And then Microsoft Office is shuffling content of nodes from back to front, and it's a mess. So we have two policies triggering on the same event and writing renditions. We have the shuffle node with two nodes for one logical document, and we have to know which is which at the moment. And if one of these fails, some exception happens, anything, it really occurred that the binary on the hard disk, you know, Alfstore 2016, March, etc., uuid.bin is lost. We had the situation by this that the node existed, the node content property was written in the database, but the bin file wasn't there, it was gone. And this is not acceptable. It's really, really a gotcha. We thought we were stupid, but it happened. So, real loss of content. What we did to fix this situation, we extended this class, the renditioned aspect, you know, the policy which triggers on property changes. In the implementation, we said, do everything as usually, but only if we are not responsible, only if there's no job in the queue for this node, or if we don't care, if it's a JPEG or a PDF which shall be transformed, we don't care, do whatever you do. But if it's a Microsoft Office document, and if we know that there's a job in the queue, don't do anything. This existing policy rendition aspect must not do anything if we want to control the saving of renditions. So by this, again, patch, we avoided the situation that two competing policies do similar things at the same or very close times. So what did we learn from all of this? The first thing is, sometimes, maybe often, it's necessary to patch existing Alfresco code. You remember the web script get content node, one line, transformer, reader, writer, plus options, to write extensions. We didn't want to change this web script. We wanted to implement our own transformer, but we weren't able because the information which could be there isn't there. Second lesson learned, Alfresco may decide not to run our code because of obscure reasons. This is the transformer thing. We thought our transformer is the one which is running, but it doesn't run because Alfresco has logic somewhere else which decides, no, I prefer a different transformer. And the third one is, always be prepared that existing Alfresco code is competing with your own. You cannot be sure that what you write, even if it is only against public APIs and doing no patching, will work. There may be something hidden in Alfresco which is doing at the same time, on the same event, on the same policy, something which competes with you. This happened to us, and we learned from this that we first have to look if there is any policy registered for an event we want to register on, and really understand what it is doing before we try to do anything like this. So that's what we've learned. Thank you. Sorry, yeah. I think we are last today here in this room, so we have plenty of time for questions. Any questions?
Yeah. For your second gotcha, with your
selector.
Transformer wasn't chosen.
Yeah.
Why didn't you just set a very high priority?
Good question. The question is, why didn't we just set a very high priority for this transformer? This is, as I said, maybe I'm too dumb. I don't understand this configuration syntax. Really, I don't understand it. It's I don't know if you know how it works. It's properties with a lot, yeah, a lot of dots in between, and the to put it bluntly, it all matters. Yeah, it matters if the fourth to last part is this and the second to last is this. I don't understand it, and I find it really hard to understand this kind of implementation. So we chose the, from our perspective, easier route to just brute force it. It's brute force, of course.
Yeah.
Second. Sorry. More?
I'm just asking because we built something of our own, which is kind of the same.
Yeah. Markus. How did we manage to restart LibreOffice? Heiko, how did we restart it?
Just by scripting. It's nearly impossible because Alfresco doesn't call LibreOffice in a way that gives a timeout or anything else. Just can see is it on the load or not. So we do it by guessing. Yeah. It's a living script.
So actually, if you you can see in if you open top or htop on your Linux console, you see the soffice process as at 98, 99, 100% CPU load, and if this is the case for longer than a minute, it's hanging, and it's safe to kill it. Just.
But I think the question is also related because you don't have the John converter.
Yes. In community, yep, that's true.
You could only restart soffice and Alfresco would be able to reconnect. Whereas in community, you probably have to restart Alfresco.
Yeah. Boris just mentioned that in community, of course, we don't have the JOD converter, which would enable a finer grained control, but in community edition, we only have LibreOffice in the backend. And this is one process, and kill it. It works at least. It's restarted. We don't have to restart it manually.
The shuffle business.
Yes.
Is that only when you go through SIFs, or I think WebDAV doesn't have the same behavior on the chef.
The question is about the shuffle. The shuffle. Thanks, Richard. The shuffle mode. If it only happens if the Alfresco is mounted using this, or if it also happens about WebDAV over WebDAV. I think it doesn't depend on this, but maybe it's an application thing. I think it's the same if Microsoft Office writes to the local hard disk.
Yeah.
Or
It's a difference if this is mounted as a
okay.
drive or if you say WebDAV as in online edit.
Yeah.
Then there's no shuffle if it's online edit.
Yeah, of course. Online edit is a different thing, but that's SharePoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nah. It's SharePoint. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.